Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, coffee break sessions presented by Strategic Treasurer, covering foundational topics and core Treasury issues in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your cup of coffee. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, Business Development Leader at Strategic Treasurer. Joining again today with me is Paul Galloway, Senior Advisor at Strategic Treasurer. Paul, again, looking forward to another great conversation. And even though our past few episodes has been about investing, this one's going to take a little bit. We're going to piggyback off of our previous episode around commercial paper on the investing side of it. But I'm also really excited to learn about the capital side of commercial paper. So, Paul, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, each session I learn, hopefully every viewer of the podcast is, get some key takeaways. I know I continuously take some things away and add to my toolbox. So I'm looking forward to this session. I know the last episode, again, we talked about commercial paper as it relates to investing. And this side of it, we're going to talk about how it relates to capital and raising capital. So who issues commercial paper?
Typically, the issuers of commercial paper are banks or non-bank financials, such as insurance companies and large corporations.
So, and I actually kind of led into my next question because that was just my thought when you just said that, but kind of dive us into your perspective here of what it's used for.
Typically, it's used to fund company operations or to cover receivables. So it could be that they have payables that are cycling quicker than the receivables. And so they may need to raise some liquidity or some cash to cover the receivables until that cash comes in the door. In some instances, the issuer may have specific projects that they may need funding for. Commercial paper can be a way to fund these various projects that the company has going on.
When a company issues commercial paper to raise that capital, is this mainly for, is it for large organizations? Is it mid-cap organizations, maybe in particular, maybe small business? Or, hey, it could be anybody or a combination thereof?
Yeah, it's typically not just anybody. I talked about, banks, non-bank financials. And so banks, these are bank names that you would typically see out in the market, the paper market. Sometimes you'll get other vehicles that could be LPs or LCs that issue paper. They're typically fairly large in size that do that. Then there's the non-bank financials like insurance companies, pretty common with insurance companies. Back in the day, I also used to buy paper for Ford Motor, GM, GE. Those are types of large corporations or non-bank financials that would issue paper. So you don't see small companies issuing commercial paper. They'll have to go to other avenues to raise liquidity or cash.
Are there limitations to issuing commercial paper?
Yes, there are limitations. So typically what happens is companies will work with commercial paper dealers. Depending on what the program purpose is and the sizing that you're trying to do, you may work with several dealers. It could be, less than a handful or up to more than that, depending on size of the program and the dealer's willingness to support the size of the program. They will look at the fundamental financial strength of the company, their ratings, they'll do analysis. They'll go into the market and they'll look for kind of indications on what the willingness is of investors to buy the paper, because you got to have a market for it. But these dealers go out and make a market for it, and they're only going to make a market for names that they believe in and are willing to support for the program.
How do you make an investment in commercial paper?
Yeah, so issuers will work directly with dealers on sizing and duration based on their specific needs. Investors, such as institutional investors, mutual funds, pension plans, or insurance companies, will work directly with the dealers to make a purchase or investment in the paper based on what their investment needs are. Sometimes this is directly negotiated with the dealer, or the purchase is made directly through a trading platform such as Bloomberg, based on what is made available in terms of yield size, duration, and ratings, and issuer names that are available out there.
I got one more question I want to ask you on this particular subject here. If you don't mind, I just want to know your perspective for an organization to look at, raising capital through issuing commercial paper. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you like, hey, I'm kind of in between. I'm lukewarm with it. I'm just kind of getting a pulse check on what your thoughts are about it.
So there's a couple of different ways you can go about that. Treasurers may have people on the team, or the treasurer itself is doing the analysis work that's needed to determine, are they good with the name or not, right? That's one approach that can be taken. The other is that it could be the treasurer is working with folks on their internal investment team. Maybe they have a credit team that they're working with. And so they're looking at the overall investment in bonds and short duration instruments that a treasury team might make. They might work together to say, okay, what do you think about these names? Are you good on these names? Are these names we should stay away from? What names do you think we should look at from an investment perspective?
Well, thank you for walking us through a little bit more into commercial paper as it relates to capital itself, what it's used for, some limitations, and just kind of give us your perspective on it. So, Paul, I really do appreciate your insights. For our listeners, please ensure to tune in every first and third Thursday of the month for a new episode of the Coffee Break Session. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please send us a note at podcast@strategictreasure.com. Until next time, take care.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasure LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.